So, I'm not a particular fan of Notre Dame in any way at all. In fact, I generally loathe them, but they absolutely have a point when it comes to the college football playoff. This year, Notre Dame missed the college football playoff and I guess lost a head-to-head tiebreaker with Miami of Florida for the final at-large spot in the field. Notre Dame and Miami played the very first week of the season, and Miami won by 3 points at home. And then they ended up with the same record, which was, I believe, 10-2. Both teams were 10-2 at the end of the year. And Miami was selected to go to the playoff because they had won the head-to-head with Notre Dame. The thing is, head-to-head, and this is the thing that drives me absolutely crazy, that college football gets wrong. Head-to-head only matters when there is a discrepancy in the number of losses. Two teams that are 10-2, head-to-head absolutely should not ever come into play. Because the reality is, the team that won the head-to-head, invariably, if they end up with the same number of losses despite having won the head-to-head, has two worse losses than the other team. If two teams are, let's say, 11-1, and one of them beat the other during the regular season, the one that lost is the team that should get into the postseason, because that is the better loss. The other team only would get in if they were undefeated. The head-to-head only matters if it's the deciding game in an otherwise equal scenario. Notre Dame and Miami were not an otherwise equal scenario. Miami had two bad losses. Notre Dame only had one other loss other than the game they played against each other. The tiebreaker shouldn't matter. It drives me nuts when we talk about this in this way. This was how people talked about Oregon and Ohio State this way for much of the 2021 season. Before Ohio State lost to Michigan that year, they had one loss to Oregon, and Oregon had one loss to somebody else. I don't know, it was Stanford or somebody. Stanford is invariably a substantially worse loss. Ohio State should have had the tiebreaker between them and Oregon that year, not Oregon just because they had won the head-to-head matchup. It drives me nuts how wrong we get this. And yet we have these circular, ridiculous debates. Nobody was having a debate about whether Stanford should get in over Oregon that year. The other thing that drives me nuts about this is that, well, this just kind of ruined my video, didn't it? The other thing that drives me nuts about this is how little respect Notre Dame gets for having lost literally in the national title game last year. This isn't some fly-by-night program that was trying to sneak its way in through the back door. This is a team that clearly was a viable national title competitor. And you saw this year what letting in more of these quote-unquote group of five or group of six teams does. They end up getting boat raced as they did a year ago and creating completely unentertaining games for everyone who's watching, and yet we still, for some reason, decided to do this year, letting Tulane and James Madison into the college football playoff. The college football playoff, if we're going to bother having a playoff, the point should be that it's a playoff for teams that have a viable chance of actually winning the title, not for random other teams just to be able to say they got in like it's March Madness and they're a 16 seed. That's not the point of this thing. These games take a lot of wear and tear on the athletes. The only point of having a college football playoff is because you think there are more teams that can actually win the title. This isn't supposed to be some Cinderella dance. This is a playoff to decide the national champion. That's why we created it. Not so you could see James Madison have to travel to Oregon and take their shot. The reality is, even if James Madison were to one of these years spring the upset on Oregon, there's absolutely zero chance they would be able to do that 4 games in a row. That's just not, there's nothing about that that suggests in any way that James Madison has a viable chance to win the national title. And if that's the case, they shouldn't be in. No team like that should be in. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the other teams. It's not for the teams that get cut. Now, all the other arguments about Notre Dame having gone on a crazy run at the end of the year, absolutely viable. Notre Dame has not done this just once. They've done this year after year after year after year, where they lose a game or two early in the year and then storm back and become a much, much, much better team. This is just how they do it. Beyond that, Notre Dame's loss to Texas A&M, of course, was on the back of like that ridiculous holding call at the end of the game that allowed Texas A&M to win in South Bend. And Notre Dame's loss at Miami was by 3 points on the road, which is below the Segrin ratings margin for home field advantage. In other words, Notre Dame was deemed the better team in the statistical ratings based on how they performed in that matchup. So the biggest thing, though, is just how little respect Notre Dame gets for having actually played in the national title game last year and having boat raced Georgia. And for some reason, that doesn't count for much with anybody. So I don't like them, but I do totally agree with them about their grievance this time around.